Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kabbalah Explained Simply. My name is Joseph, and I'm broadcasting to you live from Israel. I am a senior instructor and creative director for KabU, which is our online education center. There's a link in the description if you're interested in checking that out. I'll probably say a few more words about that later on. And today we have a live Q&A session. So this means that I would love to get any kind of questions that you have and do my best to give you Kabbalah's answer for them. And you can ask about anything, whether it has to do with some other content that you've watched on our channel, or if you're a KabU student and there's a question that is bothering you as a result of your Kabbalah studies, or any kind of question that just arises from life and you feel like Kabbalah might have some input and might shed some light on it, you're more than welcome to ask it right here. I'll be looking into the chat, and Linda and Ruth behind the scenes are helping me make sure that I'm not going to miss any question at all. So I'm really going to do my best to answer all your questions. I'll also say a few words right before we begin. But first of all, just a quick intro, and then we'll start our journey. So, okay, so Kabbalah Explained Simply. It's great to see a bunch of people from different places around the world. I see Denmark and Netherlands and Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and Vermont and Arizona, Utah, England, Australia, hello, New York City, Portugal. That's great. Romania, Michigan is here. Great to see you all. If you've just joined, let me know where you're watching from. And this is going to be a live Q&A session, so definitely go ahead and send your questions as soon as they come up. Linda and Ruth behind the scenes are helping me make sure that I'm not going to miss any questions. So as soon as you have a question, just send it into the chat, and hopefully I'll be able to get to it. So while I'm waiting for your questions, I'll say a few words. We are in a difficult, challenging, precarious situation in the world today. Everything that is happening, and right now I wasn't planning into going into a lot of detail, so I'll just say in broad strokes, everything that we're going through as a global species, everything that's happening in the world today, what you see on the news and what you don't see on the news, where the youth is at, the different ailments that we see in society, social division, wars, including that which is taking place just about 2 hours from where I'm at right now. Everything that is happening in the world today, from a Kabbalistic perspective, is not random. And not only it's not random, it is following a particular plan, a plan of evolution, a plan that comes from nature itself. And as part of this plan, human beings, which is the most developed out of the levels of still, vegetative, animate, we are the human level of nature. This is the fourth and most developed degree from a Kabbalistic point of view. Most developed in that our desire is the greatest, the most demanding, and the most evolved. And our desire as human beings is constantly developing throughout history. And human society went through many phases of development. But in our time, there is a unique turning point that is gradually happening. There is sort of a convergence of many different trends that are taking place, leading us, guiding us, pushing us to rise to a completely new level of human life on this planet. Never before we have been so globally interdependent. Never before human society was so um, locked on this planet together across the entire planet. Even though we have created countries and cities and civilization across the entire world, somehow this civilization from a global perspective is small. It is like a global village. Of course, one of the obvious indications of that is what's happening right now, this live broadcast over the internet that allows us to communicate above time and geographical space. And media in general has become very global in its nature. Something happens in a certain particular place in the world, the whole world knows about it and goes through it and follows the headlines. And in a sense, life on this planet in many ways becomes like a surreal reality show, like a surreality show, if you will, in that terrible things happen. Sometimes maybe good things happen too, you can say, you could argue, but probably mostly bad things are the things that we all hear about. And we're all following and are aware, and there's a lot more that you can actually see today versus in terms of what's happening in the world versus, say, someone who lived 50 years ago. Just up until just 50, 40 years ago, even, before the advent of the internet as a global tool, social media, mainstream media that goes around globally and so forth. Before all of that, people across the world knew about what's happening in the world in a very remote way. It would take a long time until everyone knows what happens in the other side of the world. And also, it wasn't as immediate and as up to date. And so that is not really a technological or technical change. That's how it appears to us. What is going on behind the scenes or beneath the surface is that human beings are gradually beginning to feel that they exist in a shared reality, in a shared space, that whether we are aware of it or not, like it or not, we are interdependent across this globe, and we are beginning to feel each other as parts of a global system, a single system. And that is something that we haven't yet come to grips with. And certainly, if you look at how our leaders, world leaders, are leading the world, and other aspects of how humanity conduct itself on this planet, in terms of how we use resources, in terms of how our global economic system works, and so forth, clearly we haven't got used to the idea that we are a single species on a global species on a single planet, and we have to figure out how to live together and how to get along and how to together somehow take command of this planet, this single planet that we have, and do it effectively and in a way that works for everyone. And today, with this growth of global interdependence that I've mentioned, we're being pushed. Reality, this evolutionary process, is pushing us gradually to rise to a new level of human life on planet Earth, to a new kind of idea of what it means for humanity to be alive on this planet. And the big transformation, the major upgrade, so to speak, that we need to go through has to do with the why of human life, meaning human beings have to begin to contemplate, at least, why are we here? What is our goal? And the kind of goal that we are subconsciously beginning to aim ourselves towards is a goal that is above and beyond our physical life on this planet, which we experience through our body with its five senses. That cannot be the end goal as we are approaching this stage of global transition, of global transformation, of global development. We have to find a higher goal for human life that is beyond just the comfort of our body. That stage of development that we are in sounds like maybe a good thing, a positive thing. It may open up our minds, our hearts to some new horizons, figuring out what it means to be alive and so forth. But it's also why, and we'll probably see this more and more as we move into the future, it's also why some radical extremist ideologies have a lot of power today, because they speak to a need that exists in many people today for a higher purpose to life, for a higher goal, a higher meaning and purpose for human life. And what Kabbalah offers us is an understanding of what nature's plan is pushing us towards. Where are we actually headed? And what is the goal of nature, which it has in store for human beings? Everything that we study from the texts of the Kabbalists comes from their spiritual attainment, meaning that by way of spiritual development, Kabbalists have been able to investigate, to research, sort of like the spiritual gene, if you will, of humanity, of human beings. And from that vantage point, they see where we are developing, where are we moving towards. And a lot of the wisdom of Kabbalah is about that. So what we're seeing in our time, the 21st century, this heightened hyper connection across the globe, this ever increasing global interdependence that we're seeing, that is all of these are symptoms of a major spiritual transformation that human beings are going through. And it's actually that interdependence and interconnection between all of us that is where we're going. That realm, that route of development is going to take us deeper and deeper into finding our inherent connection to each other, meaning between all human beings on this planet, and to nature itself. And that is where a higher goal of human life lies ahead of us from a Kabbalistic point of view. That is something that should be inspiring and exciting for us if we begin to open our hearts to it, to open our minds, if we begin to be attentive to our desire for meaning, for purpose. Every human being has that desire. This is the most fascinating thing. If you ask any a child on the face of planet Earth, typically as children, we have this question about why are we here? Why are we alive? What is life for? Mommy, daddy, can someone answer me? That is a typical question of a human child. Not a question that exists in other in plants or animals. And that question, which is unique to human beings, it gets quickly overshadowed and pushed to the side in the rat race of human life, the daily grind, if you want to call it that way. Gets pushed aside. It gets covered by all kinds of things that we have to do. And then maybe not, at some point we come back to that question and ask, wait a second, why are we here? What are we doing here? So on a global level, we have to begin asking this question as a species. And that question is actually the key and the direction and the path towards solving all of our other problems, which we are gradually experiencing today, increasingly experiencing due to our growing interdependence. I think I'll stop here and already move to some questions. If you have questions about this, definitely go ahead and ask them. If you want to ask about anything else, that's fine as well. So just go ahead and fill in the chat with whatever it is you want, you'd like my answer to. Okay, so I already see a question here from Sylvie. Sylvie is asking, hello, are there restrictions on food a Kabbalist is allowed to eat? I'll answer this one shortly. No. The wisdom of Kabbalah deals with the development of the soul. The soul begins to develop within us from this very special desire, which I've just discussed actually, our desire to discover the meaning and purpose of our lives. That is the initial embryonic point that your soul begins to develop from. It's not actually a philosophical question that your mind is asking. It's not an intellectual question. It's a desire. We have a tiny, but still a desire. Even though it's tiny, it's there deep down within us. We have a desire to reconnect, to consciously find the source of life itself. That is the unique desire that human beings have, and that is the beginning of the soul. Kabbalah teaches us what nourishment, if you will, what spiritual food, so to speak, we need to consume, to absorb in order to grow that point in the heart. We call this desire the point in the heart. It's like a little point in our heart which represents the totality of our desires. We have all kinds of desires. In Kabbalah, we call that the human heart. It meaning all the desires we have for food and sex and family and career and power and knowledge and honor. But we also have a little point, and that is the point that's asking what is the meaning and purpose of life. That desire, that point inside our heart, is the beginning of the soul. And that's the only thing Kabbalah deals with. Now, it's not going to matter what kind of food you eat, whether you eat this or that, in terms of how you feed your body. That's not going to affect how you feed your developing soul. And this is why, in terms of the spiritual practice itself, that's what Kabbalah deals with, and it's irrelevant. From that respect, it's irrelevant to it what you eat. I'll stop that here. Move on to another question here. Julie Dehan is asking, would you explain cause and consequence and how free will fits in. Wow, that's an enormous question, Julie. I'll maybe say a few short words about it, because that could take a whole session. Yes, we do have free will, but we need to understand where. Nature, all of development, all of evolution is working according to laws. These are unchangeable, immovable, irreplaceable laws. And some of these laws we can discover with our modern science, whether it's how electromagnetism works, or the law of gravity, or laws of biology. These are laws of nature that we can somehow research and discover and say something about them using just our five senses based perception and some tools that we use to extend the range of these senses, and our intellect, our logic, which tries to put all of this together. So nature is governed by laws, our life is governed by laws, our development is governed by laws. It's all deterministic. And yet, inside this determinism, inside this system of laws, there is some latitude, some area where we as human beings can adjust our experience of this development. That's what free choice is about. It's not that we can, create the universe entirely anew. It's not that we can change completely where we're headed. Our development is set. The goal of our development, as we call it in Kabbalah, the purpose of creation, is already set. It's predetermined. And also everything that we have to go through it to get to that purpose of creation is also predetermined. But how we experience the process, that is where our free choice lies. And how we experience the process is actually a huge thing. Even though it sounds like it's not a lot left, for us, it means everything. Because how we experience the process could be the difference between developing towards the purpose of creation by path of suffering and war and terrible violence and conflicts and, God forbid, horrible things that could take place on this planet. Or we could develop consciously by seeing where nature is pushing us, by seeing ahead of time that nature is pushing us to a higher level of connection, by aspiring to achieve that connection between us without being pushed by suffering to do so. That can change our entire experience of life and the whole chain of events that take place on planet Earth. And so free will for human beings is not about the laws of nature. We can't change them. It's not about where they're taking us. We can't change that either. But yes, there is a choice with regards to how we relate to these laws so that we experience our development, we experience the process in a conscious and pleasant way, as opposed to being pushed by these laws by way of suffering. So that, in essence, is where free will fits within an order of cause and consequence. I see more questions coming in. Here is one from To Be Conscious. There is a good portion of self-loathing in various clothings going around and being pushed. Do you see this as part of mass awakening, revealing one's own evil inclinations? Hey, I'm not 100% sure that I understood your question correctly, so I'll answer according to what I got from it, and if you want, try to clarify it in the chat if need be. Self-loathing and self-hate, in our world, it actually is just another manifestation of egoism. See, this might not be intuitive for us to understand. After you study Kabbalah for a while, it definitely is. Um, and you, I think, already are asking this more as a confirmation, because you're, from what you wrote, it seems like you're on the same page with this. Self-loathing, is just as is just the same as self-love from an earthly perspective, meaning, as long as the person doesn't come out of themselves in love of others, then they're only engaged in loving themselves. And whether it appears as a narcissist, or whether it appears as someone who self-loathes, it's actually just a different, opposite even, expression of the same quality. From a Kabbalistic point of view, even when we have uh, um, disabling conditions in people, such as depression, they too can come from, ultimately, from self-love that has grown to the point that it can't fulfill itself. And it's actually that preoccupation of the person with the self that might create a state that we call depression, for example. So yes, it may very well be that expressions of self-loathing, self-hate, are actually just clothings of the recognition of evil, the recognition of human egoism. So I hope that was what you were trying to get at. Here's another question from Lerato. Is the force called the conscience also under the influence of the ego, or is it above it? Nice question, Lerato. What is the conscience? What does it mean that a person has conscience? If you go deeper into that question, you'll see that everything we attribute to our conscience as human being is programmed by the society, the environment, the culture that we grew up with and that we are in. The obvious examples is, if you take one person from one side of the world, from a certain culture, some things could be considered good there in that culture, and going against them would be considered bad. And one who lives there will have a certain kind of conscience, while another person in the other side of the world could hold very different things as sacred, or as important, or as good, and other things as bad. Look at the world today. Some groups are waging war because, from their point of view, killing others is something that they do in the name of God. And so if you look at all kinds of terrorist groups, for them, going and killing other people is the right thing to do. So what is conscience? So conscience is a product of what your conscience is, the product of what environment you're in. What are the values, the morals that your society that you are part of appreciates and holds dear, right? So yes, of course, that concept of conscience is also under the influence of the ego. But if you begin to develop your point in the heart, your desire for spiritual development, your need to discover the meaning and purpose of human life, the meaning and purpose of existence itself, if you begin to develop spiritually, in other words, then you can begin to develop sort of like a spiritual conscience. This is what happens to people who study the wisdom of Kabbalah. We see that very clearly with people who start studying the wisdom of Kabbalah. They become students, for instance, in KabU, our online education center in English. People over even just a few weeks, sometimes they can begin to develop a higher perspective, a spiritual perspective. And even though they could only be beginners, it already is beginning to develop, and they begin to look at themselves and their thoughts and their desires and their intentions and examine whether they are calibrated towards the purpose of creation. And that becomes what you might call their spiritual conscience. But that is on a level that is gradually taking them towards exiting their ego. Because if you're developing spiritually, if you're moving truly towards spirituality, you're moving towards complete love for others, unconditional love and bestowal towards all of reality, all humanity, and everything in nature. And it's not that you immediately become like that, not at all. A big part of the spiritual development process is, and it's a continuous process, is to constantly discover your ego, the force within you, the quality within you that we call evil, meaning opposite to the quality of nature, the quality of nature's governing force, also called in Kabbalah the Creator. The Creator and the governing force of nature are synonymous in Kabbalah, literally synonymous. If you say nature, hateva, in Hebrew, it has the same numerical value as the word for God, which is Elohim in Hebrew. Baal HaSulam, the great Kabbalist of the previous century, mentions this in one of his key articles, just to show to us and to emphasize to us that nature or God is really the same thing from a Kabbalistic perspective. So the governing force of nature, the governing quality and intention of nature behind the limited picture of reality that we see is an intention of complete love and bestowal. If you're developing spiritually, you want your thoughts, desires, intentions to be in that quality. You're aiming for that, and that becomes your conscience. That becomes the ruler by which you measure yourself. I hope that helps. Thank you for the question. Okay. Aspen Golden is asking, is everyone welcome? Race, religious beliefs, gender, who one loves? Yes, absolutely yes. Baal HaSulam writes, again, the great Kabbalist of the previous century, the one who gave us the commentary on the book of Zohar, giant Kabbalist. There's a beautiful quote that I'm not gonna dig into it and find it right now because it'll take a while. But in essence, it says something like this: the purpose of creation unequivocally lies on the shoulders of the whole human race, whether they are white, black, yellow, or anything else. In other words, nature doesn't see those differences that we see in the same way. For us, there are differences between human beings, like you said, of gender and color and race and what is it? What today is the thing people are most fighting about? Political views, sexual preferences, right? All of those. from nature's point of view, all the differences are there for a reason. They might be in a process of development, and therefore they might change. Maybe they won't be tomorrow what they are today. Maybe human beings are going through all kinds of scrutinies, self-scrutinies, and psychological processes that make them develop and change their views or their flavors, preferences, and tastes in things and so forth. But all the differences between us are there for us to complement each other and achieve, by that connection between the differences, we can actually achieve a state of peace. Peace, from a Kabbalistic perspective, from a spiritual perspective, peace, in Hebrew, the word is shalom. It implies shlemut. It comes from the word shlemut. Shlemut means perfection or wholeness. So peace is not just the absence of conflict. It's not you and I or this country and that country achieving some agreement, economic agreement, or some treaties. I won't hurt you, you won't hurt me. That's not peace from a spiritual perspective. I'm not saying that's not a good thing to have to calm things down in the violent landscape of our world. Sure, but from a spiritual perspective, it's not even close to being enough. The kind of peace that we need to achieve as human beings is a higher level of existence. It's a level where we, each of us, with our differences, with our different qualities and attributes and even views, we come together and these differences actually become harmonious. They become a harmony. And so peace, true peace, spiritual peace, is when we're able to each be unique, and at the same time, our quality of uniqueness, of singularity, becomes in order to serve the whole. So that state of harmony, where every note has a role to play, but the role it has to play is in contributing to the general harmony, that is what true peace is really about. And let you in on a little secret from a Kabbalistic perspective. For better or for worse, we're not going to have lasting peace in our world if we don't achieve true spiritual peace in our hearts with each other. So, to conclude, yes, that goal, the purpose of creation, which Kabbalah talks about and explains how to get there as fast as possible in a conscious way, that goal embraces everyone, and so does the method of Kabbalah. Doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, what your color or background is, and also not religion, by the way. I can tell you for a fact that there are many students who study, my friends who are studying the wisdom of Kabbalah for a long time from all over the world, and they come from all walks of life and from many different backgrounds, including many different religions, whether it's Islam or Christianity or Judaism or Buddhism, or I think I've pretty much seen any kind of person among our students, people who study the wisdom of Kabbalah. So thank you for the question. Let's move to David. Here's one from David. Why is there war, tyranny, poverty, and injustice in the world despite scientific, technical, and cultural progress? The internet, artificial intelligence, for example. You're absolutely right, David. How are you, by the way? David is a longtime KabU student. And yeah, you're right. You're absolutely right. That's exactly the proof that this is not the problem. Meaning, the reason we have war and tyranny and poverty and injustice in the world, like you say, the reason for that is not because we lack resources, or we lack technology, or we lack medicine, or communication, or anything. No, the only reason is because of the human ego. That ego, which constitutes our nature, it's the intention with which we were born, meaning every human being in this world, until they have developed spiritually, all of their desires, thoughts, actions are imbued with and are governed by a program of self-benefit. That, in some cases, we manage to cope with it. We make all kinds of laws between us that help us get along while we each actually just want our self-benefit. That's what we live for, whether we are more or less aware of it. But in other cases, we can't come up with the rules and regulations that actually make us get along, and then we fight. And then we create systems that are unjust because, again, they're governed ultimately by self-benefit. So whether it's a few people at the top, or whether it's this party against that party, or whether it's those who hold power against those who have none of it, or whether it's those who who initiate violent conflicts, all of these are coming from our evil nature. Evil is a problematic word, but I hope that by now, because it has all kinds of baggage and religious baggage, and it could be misunderstood. But if you interpreted it in a technical way, it's about the egoistic intention of the human being. That is called the evil. And that egoistic intention is something that has to come to the surface. We have to discover that we are egoistic towards each other in order to correct that intention, to recalibrate ourselves, to rise to a new level of consciousness. For that, we have to go through that revelation of the ego. But does it have to manifest in bloody words and horrible violence? No. The faster and more consciously we move towards connection between us, towards an intention of love towards others, the more we try to work on that, the less problems we will need on the outside material world to manifest for us to develop. That exactly is also related to the area of free choice, which we discussed earlier in an answer to Julie's question. So thank you for this one, David. Let's move to another question here from Jacqueline. Jacqueline is asking, would you say that we are living in two different timelines right now? I'm not sure why you're saying that. It sounds like an interesting question, Jacqueline. If you can clarify this one and give more context to what you mean by that, I hope I'll be able to answer it. So add some more context to it. Let's see. Giselle is asking, following Lorado's question, what about the conscience, not referring to good or bad, but conscience in the sense of presence, aware of the here and now, the capacity to self-observe. Okay, that's already a different kind of definition. I was relating before to a different definition of conscience. I think what you mean here is more about the distinction that exists between our emotions, our experience of reality, everything we go through in life, what we do, think, and feel, and the observer point within us that is observing all of that. That distinction between what we go through and who's going through it, the observer within us, so to speak, that is a relevant distinction in terms of in terms of the scrutinies that we do spiritually in our spiritual development. I wouldn't call it conscience. You can call it the self, or the I of the person, or the observer point. And yes, it's a good area to pick into and think about. Um, I think that when you start studying Kabbalah in a systematic way, and you start understanding the difference between desires and intentions, between the heart and the mind, and when you start to study that and observe that on yourself, you begin to have a better grasp of that observer point. But yes, getting into that and exploring that is certainly part of the spiritual process. Okay, I'll say even one more word about it. The true path to developing that observer within you is not just by introspection. Sure, it's a part of it. All of the spiritual work in Kabbalah is referred to as inner work, meaning it's the work of the heart. It's how we work with everything we've got to calibrate our hearts. But what you'll find in the wisdom of Kabbalah is that in order to really develop that objective observer, so to speak, what you need to aim yourself towards is connection with others, because that's the only thing that can take you outside of yourself. And you can't just be outside of yourself by thinking about it. You have to develop a quality of love towards others, you have to care for others. And the more you can fill yourself with concern for others, the more you can be outside of just being inside yourself. I'll stop that here. Let's see. Yeah, we still have a couple of minutes. We can still do a few more questions. Clinton Edwards is asking, is the soul correction process really possible in one life? Okay, definitely a relevant question. I'll tell you this. There is such a state called the final correction. The final correction is the state that all of humanity reaches when every human being has corrected their soul. That global final correction or collective final correction is the purpose of creation. That's why we are going through everything that we're going through in this world. Meaning that ultimately, all of the things that we're going through, personally, socially, globally, the development of technology, the historical developments that we went through, wars, everything that we're going through is in order to achieve that ultimate state of correction for all of mankind. Now, there's also a personal state of that final correction, which some handful, very few and huge Kabbalists have achieved, but there's no words to describe that. They only describe the path towards and the method so that we can climb up that ladder of spiritual development as well. Now, can one person do that and go up the ladder in one life cycle? Well, in potential, yes. It's all up to the person. It's all up to the person who is laboring in spiritual work, in spiritual development. If you have a point in the heart, meaning a desire for spirituality, a desire to explore the meaning and purpose of your life, and it has consciously awakened in you in this life cycle, that means that potentially speaking, in potential, you can develop that all the way to the final correction in your lifetime. But even if you don't, even if you develop it just partially, that doesn't go away. Even if your body goes away, you've already achieved some sensation, some perception, some existence in your soul. And your soul is not your body. And it's not attached to your body as some people think. The body is just an illusion. It's an imagination, as this entire world is. This is not a perception of reality session, so I'll stop here without getting you too confused. But in short, any development that you make spiritually stays with you, and it doesn't go away, even if you haven't completed your entire correction in a single lifespan. And if you do the work fast enough and well enough, you might even achieve it within a single lifetime. The potential to do it is there. I see another question from Jacqueline. Maybe, I don't know if it's a clarification of the previous one or a new one. So let's give it a shot. What if you love being inside yourself more than outside? Well, Jacqueline, it's very good that you're aware of it. We all ultimately love ourselves more than we love others. Let's put it like that. Now, what does it mean to love being inside yourself? That is subjective. I don't know exactly what you mean by that, because different people might have a different take on it. If you ask someone who is depressed, maybe they'll say that they're suffering from always being inside themselves, inside their head, inside their thoughts, inside their desires, and so forth. Maybe that is painful to them, and that would be being inside themselves, and they wouldn't like that. So for them, that would be a bad thing. What does it mean for you to be inside yourself? I'm not sure. Again, it's subjective. But one thing that I can tell you with regards to spiritual development is that you don't need to stop loving yourself to develop spiritually. It's not that people who study Kabbalah, they hate themselves. It's not about our qualities, our traits, how I don't know, stingy I am, or how creative I am, or what I like this about myself, I don't like that about myself. That's not, all of that is below the level that Kabbalah deals with. Kabbalah deals with, why do we live our life? How do we use our qualities and traits? What's the purpose of everything that we have, and all the everything that we are, and our experience of life? That's where self-love has to be transformed to love of others. Meaning, I don't hate my own qualities. I don't need to even pay attention to them that much. What I am hating and loving is the intention. The intention of life needs to develop to be for the sake of the whole. And that's where my spiritual battle is. So most likely, whatever you're describing living inside yourself as, however you see it, it's probably fine. Don't worry about it. Just work on developing your spiritual intention. And gradually, as you develop more of this will become clearer to you. You'll better understand where you are in the process and what are the different layers inside of you. You'll see that there is a bodily level, there is a psychological level, and there's also a spiritual level. And one doesn't have to be in contrast with the other. So don't go so quickly to rule out some qualities inside yourself or some desires that you have. This is actually not the Kabbalistic method. The Kabbalistic method is not to try to suppress ourselves, not to try to suppress our ego or try to hold in certain traits that we have. No, the method of Kabbalah is about developing your ability to rise above your growing ego. And while your ego grows, it grows if you study Kabbalah, it grows if you develop spiritually. On top of it, you rise to a higher spiritual level time and again. This is actually called in Kabbalah the work of 3 lines: left, right, and middle, where left represents the growth of the ego, the right line represents the growth of, let's say, our point in the heart, our desire for connection, our desire for love. And every time we have to walk on these 2 lines and find the middle. The middle line is where the left and the right join together to make a spiritual being, meaning a part of you that already has an ego that was corrected with an intention to bestow. And that is how you build your spiritual self, on that middle line. These are very advanced notions. I'm just throwing them here just to give you some more Kabbalistic terms to work with. But if you really want to get deep into it, you should get into the actual courses where we teach this systematically. This is a good moment. We're also soon out of time. I'll mention that there's a link in the description to a free trial in KabU, where we have courses and student forums and a bunch of things. We have basically everything that one needs to have a spiritual environment and content and guidance to develop spiritually in a step-by-step manner. All of that exists inside KabU, our online learning center. So check out the link in the description. Maybe our friends will throw one into the chat as well. So you're more than welcome to look into that and check it out. At this point, I'm going to have to conclude. I know there are some more questions that we haven't gotten to. I think we did cover a bunch of questions tonight, so that's nice. The other questions, we'll do our best to answer them in next sessions or maybe in videos. Thank you very much for being here, for asking questions, and I will see the KabU students in an additional Q&A session that we will have right now on Zoom. If you're a KabU student, you would have received the link in the email. So check your email. If you're not a KabU student and you want to join our additional Q&A session right now, just go to that link again, free trial to KabU, get in there, sign up. I think you'll be able to, even if you do it quickly, you'll be able to join the Zoom that we're going to have in just a minute or two with the KabU students. So thank you very much, everyone, once again for being here. Thank you for your questions. And I'll see the KabU students on Zoom in just a minute. Till then, all the best, everyone. Thank you.